Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversation. We're inviting people from all sides to reflect and we're here with um Kevin Howard, who is the author of Onward at Last, the president election edition. I'm excited because we're not delving into this book. We're actually taking it piece by piece. We're literally really analyzing it. And I have to say, not over analyzing it. It is worth the time we're going to spend on it. We've started with part one, like Kevin said. This is part two, and I believe there's going to be anywhere from, who knows, 10 to 15 parts of this because every bit of it is significantly important. Sometimes every sentence of it, when I start highlighting what I have in front of me, I start thinking, wow, I've highlighted a lot, and that's okay. So we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. And we are challenging assumptions. We're going to jump right into that. We are going to ultimately attempt to bridge divides. I don't know how far we're going to get with that, but
You did
and
pretty
then
well the last time, Coach. You
we
you
did
had
between the three of us, but that's for certain. We definitely grew, and we definitely come to some realizations that um there's some realizations to come to. Really, there was a
it's,
lot there. There was a lot there. But today I'm going to start right here. Your hands a collection of just such vital culture criticism, and we do criticize a lot, and we are criticizing cultural habits and changes at the moment. We are in the crux of all that, and not
we
all.
Coach, if I could interrupt you so that the listeners know what you're reading right now is from the forward by a gentleman named John Fullerton, who is a former investment banker who formed the Capital Institute, and where they teach regenerative economics and regenerative finance. And he's a current member of the Club of Rome. So this was a pretty significant guy who is critiquing, or at least this is his forward for the book. So by all means, continue.
Oh no, that's great. And the fact that you're able to get this gentleman to do the forward for this book is really a testament to this book. Like you said, he is a significant player and a capital investment an investor cap what was it? Investment capital. He
So he did the Capital Institute, and he is a former Wall Street investment banker. You
investment
know,
banker. So
yeah,
and investment bankers are a key component of our economy today. Now, there's some thought that maybe, like you said, capitalism cannot survive another 100 years. We're at a point where we've always got to beat the last year. And we're growing, 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 growing. And how can we continue growing? We don't have the resource to do that. And then there was that, the day, on that date, where we literally use what we have for the year. In America, we're in February. If in the world, we're in, I believe, May. Tell me more about that too,
that's
so we don't get too far ahead of ourselves.
that's right. We're talking. You are referencing Earth Overshoot Day, and it's the day of the year that we extract as much natural resource as the Earth is capable of replenishing in 1 year. And so, as of 2024, Earth Overshoot Day was May 2nd. So, every day after May 2nd of the year, we are drawing natural resources. We're drawing down natural resources that would be available for future generations. And the problem is Earth Overshoot Day is getting earlier and earlier in the year because as we grow, as our economies grow, and they necessarily have to, because that's how capitalism works, we are using more and more resource. So basically, we're drawing down the available natural resources of the earth. This is one of the reasons why fundamentally we need a new type of economics. And it is not socialism. It is a new, not an alternative of what we've already had, but a new, innovative, forward thinking type economics that allows us to remain within the carrying capacity of the earth so that future generations, 10 generations from now, they will have access to resources that can sustain them. In the same way that 10 generations ago, they did not destroy the natural resources that sustain us. Okay, so
Or
so
at the
yes.
level, or at the level we're destroying them. At the level we're destroying them currently, and their level literally is getting significantly worse probably by the year. I can't say I know that for a fact, but I could probably throw that out there and say it's probably there's some good reason to believe that.
Well, yeah,
But
it follows the trend line of our economic growth. As GDP grows as a metric, right? It represents stuff that we're producing, literally. And so we're producing more stuff, more stuff, more stuff. That is extracting more resource out of the earth. So unfortunately, yeah, Earth Overshoot Day now is May 2nd as of last year, and progressively that's getting earlier. In fact, an example of that is if the world consumed the way the United States consumes. So as opposed to Earth Overshoot Day, what would that day be if everyone consumed like America? America's Overshoot Day, right? It would be February 26th or something like that, literally, right? So the idea we would need 7 Earths if all 8.3 billion people on the planet consumed like the United States consumed, we would need about 7 Earths to sustain that on an ongoing basis. And so therefore, yes, it's imperative that we understand that we cannot continue to do this.
so let's be realistic. When we bring out the fact that the United States is at this rate, and if the world were to follow this rate, it's because the United States has a vibrant economy. We have a
Yes.
lot going on here. We have a lot.
Yes.
We have a lot of highways. We have a lot of theme parks. We have a lot of everything, and it's all whether it's doing really well or not. It's always pretty vibrant. So when we say it's not doing well, when we're looking at a possible recession or a recession, or when even if we're in a recession where there's some retraction, where there's some contraction of the economy, we're still consuming a lot of raw materials, no matter
Yeah.
what the economic state is. Then comes the reality that then comes the frantic behavior of how do we reinvigorate? How what is the I think what is the how do there was a term it was like where you well whatever it is where the
To
government injects
regenerate,
no, when you're talking about revibrating the economy, when you're talking about how do we get out of a recession, how do we get back to growth, how do we get back to
to
positive
stimulate
growth,
the economy.
stimulate the economy, and then and then so that's the thinking here is we can't have 3 quarters of negative growth. That's generally what we consider a recession. I think is 3 quarters of negative growth. We
That's
can't
right.
have that. When we get to when we're about to have that third quarter, we start acting. The government starts reacting. We inject cash that actually reinvigorates the economy, starts that whole cycle again. So, but here's my thing now: is when we let's take into consideration where we're at. We decide we've got to find a new way. So there's there's some things all some people are living in homes that are not energy efficient. Theme parks are utilizing plastic cups and plastic trays, not good for the environment. Is there any chance of and then you got that ideological thinking if we turned off every drippy faucet, if we had a plumber turn off every drippy faucet overnight tonight, would that because water is an issue. When we think about what we're not regenerating rainwater, like drinking water, like we're supposed to. And in some parts of the world, it's ironic that when we think of the thing we get most from the Middle East is oil, and that's something we really need. In the Middle East, the big short is water. They need drinking water, and there's wars been fought over water in the Middle East. And the whole Golan Heights Israel thing, that's the only fresh water, and that's a big part of the fresh water in the Middle East is the Golan Heights. So I mean, I just that was what I have to start with that right there. Tell us more about how can we, without reinventing the entire economy, is there steps we can take to move that Earth Overshoot Day back from February for America to May or June?
Well, the good news, coach, is as a humanity, we're creatures of necessity. We do what we must do. And so this is a situation that we must respond to, or we are facing existential issues. In other words, on the path that we are, if we just continue to do what we're doing, right, that 8.3 billion people is going to reduce dramatically. It's going, I mean, okay. And so how does that, what do I mean by that? You mentioned water shortages in the Middle East. We have water shortages in the United States. Part of part of how we are destabilizing the earth and is it with all the extraction that we do is that we're breaking the water cycles. And so you whether you look at the system, the the Colorado River system, and you look at Salt Lake, in Utah or whatever, you have water systems in the United States that are at the lowest they have been. And so the whole water network that supports, for example, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, right? Okay, each one of those states has an allocation that they get to draw in order to preserve access to fresh water. And one of the biggest pressure points for the state of California is that because Arizona is upstream, Arizona, Arizona does not have water shortages, but California,
Right.
they have brownouts and they all types of things. And yet, all of those states who draw on that water system have been forced to take a shave because the water levels are so low. So I'm saying is, so to answer your question is, it's out of necessity. I mean, we won't have a choice because if we were to the extent that we are losing access to fresh water, we can't sustain the communities in which it serves, right? And it's not just the water. It is, if you look at the nutrient quality of the food that is mass produced, in the United States, that we literally are over producing food on in out of the most fertile farmland in the world, one of the most fertile farmlands in the world, the breadbasket of America. We are draining the nutrient quality of that because we're not rotating the fields. We're not rotating the crops like indigenous people knew to do, like we knew to do 100 years ago. We are doing industrial farming and that type of thing. And what it is literally, a cucumber or our produce does not have the same nutrient quality it did 20 years ago, right? And we're measuring it. So we're getting to a point where we are going to deplete the nutrient value of our food if we continue to overproduce on the soil without giving it a chance to replenish, right? And so all of these are things that force humanity to say, okay, we have to do something different. So what can we do different? We started to talk about this in the last interview, part one of our interview, right? And it has to do with the fact that, just okay, think of your household, because when you think of the macroeconomics, when you think of the global issues, too big. Think about your own household. If you find for whatever reason that you need to use less resource, the first natural thing you would do is, how can I be more efficient with the resources I do have so that I can stretch it longer? Okay, so how could we be more efficient with with all the stuff that we buy and get and do and use? Okay, and it's one really, really obvious thing that is in our blind spot is is how we use resource, what our relationship to resource is based on ownership. So now I know this is the third rail. This is where socialism comes into the mind. Oh my God, he's going to question ownership. No, the problem with ownership is that it entitles us to use resource however we want to use it. So how do we actually use it? When you own something, like we have cars, you have cars sitting outside your house. Okay. That the materials that were used for the cars that we have sitting outside our houses or in our garages, right? Okay. Most of the productive life of the vehicle is wasted waiting for us to actually use it, right? Okay. And so what I'm saying is, one way to be more efficient is not for all of us, all 8.3 billion people, to have two cars or three cars and stuff like that. No, it is for us to be able to share. How about that, right? Because, okay, if we can use sophisticated, if we can innovate sophisticated use share systems where you just take your smartphone and say, okay, I know I'm going to need to go to tomorrow. I'm going to need to go to A, B, C, D, and E, and I need this kind of transportation. And so you just order the transportation you actually need so that you have the type of car you need when you need it. Right now, it feels like Star Trek, and you just put in, okay. But the idea is then we could build cars that actually are just enough for us to use when we need it and not just have the car sitting there and 98% of its effective life, it's just waiting for us to use it. Well, if someone could be using that car while we are not using it, but we can always access any type of car we need when we need it, then we still have the benefit of having cars, but it's not wasting away for whenever we just happen to use it. So let's stop right there for a second. And coach, I want you to analyze what I'm just saying there. If we shift from an ownership relationship with resource to a stewardship relationship with resource, and the stewardship simply means that we use the resource in such a way that it does benefit us, but we preserve it for our children and their children and their children. In other words, that's how we use it. We're not using it and throwing it away. We're not riding it like it's rented. We're not acting like we don't care, about whether someone else will be able to use it ultimately, right? Because okay, so that's what I'm proposing. You want to move America's overshoot day from February 26th or whatever, to March, to April, to May. Okay, we start by sharing the resource we have, right? And that would be one way to do it. What do you think?
Okay, so this is an incredible point you bring out. I'm gonna tell you what I think, and it's granted, it's what I think, and it's essentially what I see. But there is no reason for me to be able to. There's no reason to believe I'm able to document it right now. I'm telling you, there's a lot of movement in that direction. What you're talking about, right? There is Tesla, who you buy any Tesla now for $99 a month, you can get a self-driving feature. There is the notion that sooner or later those are going to be shared rides. That you're going to be parked at your office doing your work and that car can be called on in a self-driving format and doing an Uber in a self-driving within the city. And so there and then there's the movement of which the new CEO of Ford has expressed ride sharing is the future of the auto business. And
Yeah.
he is actually Ford Motor Company has actually just announced they're building a new headquarters maybe three times the size. It's going to include technology. It's going to include the executives with the workers, with the developers, and there's going to be a lot of integration and a lot of communication amongst all the employees. And ride sharing is a big part of that. Ride sharing is a big part of the future. Now I'm going to get a little speculative. There's also Apple announced they've dismantled their auto driving division. 1,000 employees have been working on this project for over 10 years. $1 billion spent. They ended the program. I mean, Steve, Steve Cook said he's ending the program. The programs are moving 1,000 employees to AI. But there's this other movement going on, and so I like to do the six degrees to Warren Buffett when it comes to the economy. He bought the Berkshire Hathaway company bought Flying J truck stops for billions of dollars. And it's a good business. It's not necessarily his type of business. Now next step. Okay, let's go to coordinate step 2. Step 2 is him and Steve Cook are work together on a lot of things, including it was literally one of Berkshire's best investments. They have downsized their holdings in the company, but it's still so I could foresee a time because there is a question of when it comes to ride sharing, you can't really have an automatic driving car across state lines because of state regulations. But then they said the one way to bypass that is through commercial trucking. So now you've got Warren Buffett owning Flying J. truck stops. You've got Apple with a lot of information on how to create self-driving vehicles. And then you've got the notion that in order to cross state lines, you need sensors in the road. You can't just have an auto driving car operating with its own sensors under the hood. So now you've got commercial trucks being able to be pulled in across states with the sensors in the road that could be facilitated in every Flying J truck stop. That means that 18 wheelers, I never know how to shut down the phone. That means that 18 wheelers could be ride sharing in the next few years. That means they're not going to sit idly while the truck driver sleeps. The truck driver could step in a room at Flying J truck stop and it could go on to auto share. So my point being, that was a lot to unpack, and there may still be a little people I left a little confused on what I'm trying to point out. But there could be a cooperation, there could be a partnership between Apple and Berkshire. There's a lot of movement on ride sharing. Ford is getting big into ride sharing. That's all capitalism. That's all capitalism on the move. So then comes my when the Democratic Party feels global warming. But then there's Kevin Howard who's talking about Earth Overshoot Day. Is it better to spell Earth Overshoot Day and incorporate the government with corporate America and the individual American? Or is it better to have Andrea Ocasio Cortez as our presidential candidate talking global warming, which has been perceived as absolute bullshit by a lot of people, not necessarily just Republicans. So now I give the floor to you.
Hey, Coach, I appreciate that whirlwind. So yes, I the concept that you're referring to is just an expression of how rideshare could work, and there's the signs that in the current economy efforts are going on. Okay, but the idea I was trying to say is that if we are using too much natural resource to produce the products and services that sustain the modern economy, right? And therefore we need to get more efficient with the resource sharing, and sharing is a way to do that. If and this is the important part, if we can innovate use share systems that allow people to be able to order on demand the products that they need so they have them when they need it. So the idea is not to go back to the 1900s where people are doing without. What we're talking about is we can innovate how everyone can still have the products they need when they need it. What we're doing is just by sharing, is just reserving the resource for when we use it, not just have it waste away waiting for us to use it. So that's one way. Another way to be efficient with our resource is we need to eliminate product quality differentiation. So what is this? Product quality differentiation. The way capitalism does work is that is that products and services are offered at the price, the quality of the products and services that are produced are based on who can buy them. So if you don't if you for the working class, for people who have less income, right, than extremely wealthy people, we literally produce products and services that are far less quality than we are capable of producing, okay? Because those people can't afford it for the better quality. And so therefore, the net effect, look around your office, look around your entire life. The net effect is everyone listening to this conversation lives in a sea of substandard product and experience a sea of substandard services, because unless you're wealthy enough to afford the best that we have to offer, you can't access that. Well, the problem with the lower quality product and service is that it doesn't last as long. It doesn't provide the same level of benefit that a higher quality service would provide, right? And so you have to use more natural resource to produce a lower quality product. Why? Because you're constantly churning it. Instead of having it for 20 years or 10 years and it gave you excellent service, you got to replace it every 4 years, right? Okay. And so, but see, that need to have to buy it again and buy it again is what drives the economic growth of a capitalist economy. Okay. But the problem is it wastes a lot of resource, natural resource, to have to produce. If you could produce something that's going to last 10 years, but the thing that lasts 10 years only goes to the people who have the most to pay, who are wealthy. So therefore you're going to produce things that only last 2 years. And so over the same 10-year period, you have to have that same product 5 times, right? That's the kind of waste of natural resource I'm talking about. What we need is
So let me
what
just
we
point out one
need.
thing. That
Yeah.
giant form of waste also fills our landfills, which is an
Yes,
ecological
absolutely. That
disaster.
that that's the other part. So what I'm saying is we need to get rid of the differentiate quality differentiation. And so because it now just imagine, wrap your brain around the fact, because it doesn't sound like it's real, but it's actually possible. Imagine if every product that we use was produced to the best information that the accumulation of human knowledge, how we know how to do this thing as best as it can be. Imagine if it was designed that way, and that it could be repaired easily, right? It was designed to be repaired easily, and so therefore, because it's the best quality it can be, it's designed to last as long as it possibly can last. And then when it does actually start to break down, it's easily repairable. And when it cannot be repaired anymore, the end product, instead of going in a landfill, can be taken and put in the start of the process and repurposed to be used again. Okay. Okay. That would be a way to use less resource, right? Because you're not having to recycle. The same person trying to get the use of the product is not having to buy another product, buy another. Okay, right. The problem is you can't have capitalism if that's how products are served. Why? Because that would absolutely collapse economic growth.
So
Economic growth is in a capitalist system is primarily based on consumption, right? Okay, and so what I'm saying to you here is that all the problems in terms of the use of natural resources, in terms of the extent to which the planet is overheating, are derivative of the perpetual growth requirement of capitalism. It is the global economic system is creating these problems, right? And so this is what I mean. We need another type of economics. And we this blind spot that we have, that capitalism is the only way, right? Or the only alternative is socialism, is not only detached from history, because, oh, by the way, we only created capitalism in the 1700s. So we have a lot of history before that. There were other economic systems before that, right? The idea that we can't innovate, we can't create a new economic system, that capitalism is the end of history. This is the best that we could possibly do, is simply does that belies our entire innovation model. That we are humans who can create anything we want to create. The reason why we have to shift from capitalism is not because we don't like capitalism, it's because it's encouraging us to overuse and overdraw natural resources, and it's encouraging us to overheat the planet, which is creating water shortages, which is creating extreme weather events. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. So first idea is of being efficient is let's share and use share systems so that we can have the products we need when we need them. The second one is eliminate quality differentiation. Make everything to the best quality you can. One, it would benefit all of us. One. Two, it would save a lot of natural resources. Okay. But to do that, you cannot have capitalism. Because if we actually did that, it would collapse economic growth because it would reduce the need for consumption at the rate that we consume today.
So there's a lot to unpack there. I felt like there was a sense of urgency for me to interrupt for a moment just because I want to be able to unpack everything with and still remember what there was a lot there, and I'm gonna get started. I over elaborated on the notion of ride sharing. That's okay, but it is a part of sharing. It is a sense
Yes.
of economic gentrification that we are starting to change certain things within the capitalist thinking. Is there financial gain within ride sharing? And there is financial gain. Then comes the question of, just like you said, we're building products according to the ability to pay for them, which means that a a single mom who's living in a Habitat for Humanity home needs a new refrigerator. She's going to buy a lesser expensive refrigerator that's not going to last the 20 years that a more affluent home buys a Bosch refrigerator. Okay. So then comes the waste. Then comes that refrigerator winding up at a lot of them winding up in our landfills. Again, there's a sense of can capitalists be the predominant beneficiaries of this new economic system? Because somehow I always believe that the capitalist is going to prevail in this world. It's hard to say that that when you think of investment bankers who have gone to what you're talking about, they haven't given up their lifestyle in the process. You don't ever see an investment banker leaving Wall Street and saying, I better downsize my home to a one bedroom apartment because my income just went from 600 grand this year to 45 grand. It doesn't necessarily happen that way. And then comes what I like to say is when people say I'm a political activist, I say, no, no, I am not a political activist. Political activists ultimately run for office. Somehow, someway in the back of their mind, they're wondering when is their turn to run for office. I like to consider myself and you a social entrepreneur. We're raising awareness. We're not raising money to run for office. You've created this incredible book that we can't even get to page 4 without 4 hours of discussion. And that's just great because, well, actually page 5, I stand corrected. Page 5, and that's just great. But how can Kevin Howard, because I know you're in the consulting business, and I know, and you can talk about that too, but how can Kevin Howard ultimately enter the consulting business and get the point across that we're getting a lot of things wrong? It's not just about global warming. It's not just about taking a lot of money and throwing it at the problem. It's about changing a lot of mindsets. And whether they're individual mindsets or investor mindsets, it's about changing those mindsets.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Thank you for that question, Coach. And first and foremost, I just want you to know that everything I say is not, this is not my ideas, by the way, by the way. And this, there are many
But
people
they're great
working.
ideas.
Oh yeah, that, no, they are. And
They're
no,
not
I
necessarily your ideas, but you've developed this book, and you're the guy right now at the forefront of this effort because I don't think there's any other book out there like it. I look into a lot of stuff.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I do think, see, the thing is, just like with any innovation, Elon Musk creates a new thing that drives his billionaire status, right? But the new thing is merely a the most tangential increase on a history of innovation. So and that's what I'm doing here. I am bringing together different ideas in a unique way, right? That's my contribution, but I didn't create all the ideas. And so I'm trying to first and foremost acknowledge that. But on to what you're saying specifically in terms of me as a consultant, in terms of me trying to have this conversation, because we are creatures of necessity, when we look at the sustainability of our economy, our capacity to continue to do what we're doing, the brightest of the brightest, the most greedy capitalists out there, investment bankers, hedge funds, they know already that we cannot continue to do what we're doing, right? They do know this. There is no, when it comes to the whole global warming thing, I just want to disabuse anyone on this front who's listening to this conversation. Okay. There is no issue that has the global unanimous consensus than the fact that fossil fuels are, which is the exhaust from burning oil, natural gas, and carbon and coal, right? That fossil fuels are literally overheating the planet, and it's destabilizing the ecology that supports current life on Earth. The proof of that, and I will refer anyone to it, is Google or use your search engine to put in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's synthesis report summary for policymakers. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a United Nations organization of scientists comprised of every country in the United Nations, every country, including two other countries who are not recognized by the United Nations. And the leading not-for-profit scientists in the United States, that would be scientists from NOAA and the Department of Energy, for example, right? The leading scientists from all 195 nations, right, unanimously agree to the scientific findings of the synthesis report for the summary for policymakers. It's only 40 pages long. Okay, so let us dispel the fact human-induced climate change is true. The reason why there's any confusion about it is because capitalists, literally, who are profiting from the use of fossil fuels, are poisoning the well and distorting the information and trying to confuse people as to whether or not it's true or not. So whether I'm talking about Donald Trump, who I voted for, or I'm talking about these spin meisters who are lying to us at ExxonMobil, right? Right? Factually speaking, when you have the scientists of Israel and Iran and Russia and China and the United States and the entire European Union and all 53 nations of Africa, all these scientists unanimously agree that we are causing this problem through the use of fossil fuels. It is beyond politics. It's beyond ideology. It's beyond, Toyota versus Honda. Okay, it's just factually true. It's the best understanding the globe of human scientists has. Okay, so hopefully, for once and for all, Google that, use your search engine, get your 40-page document, read what it says, because it's in English. That's what they call it, summary for policymakers. They're not talking to science geeks. They're trying to talk to governments and CEOs and chief risk officers and stuff like that in language that we can understand. So please go pull that out, read that, and
Well, tell
then
me right
you
now
can.
because I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to print it, but I didn't want to say that on the actually just tell me real quick, I'll write it down. Summary for policymakers.
It is the synthesis. It is the 2023 synthesis report summary for policymakers, and
Okay, because I am going to
it's produced by the IPCC. The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, I mean it's a beautiful, a beautiful 40-page document in actual English that tells you the global unanimous consensus on the latest science relating to these issues, right?
so I
And
will be
so,
prepared with this document our next interview because I will
oh,
have it printed.
Coach, I will, yeah, you do that, but because I want you, because you're proving that you can go find it. It is easy to find.
No,
Okay.
no, I can find it. I'm just saying I'm going to find it and I'm going to print it. I'm going to have it here on my desk when we do the next interview
But
because
but
I'm
but
a
but coach, the important takeaway there is, and why I keep on saying this is that the heart of the problem, these are the consequences of capitalism running its course, right? I mean, if you're driving in your car and you see the RPMs start moving towards the red, you start heading 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. Okay, You know that once the RPMs hit that red zone, that the car is not going to function as designed. The reasonable range for the way the car was designed is for it to be in that 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 range. Once you get up into the 9,000 range, right, things are going to start shaking, stuff is going to start happening. Okay, this is where capitalism is today. It worked of historical economic systems, it's the best ever. No question, bar none. Totally grateful for it, right? But we are deep in the red, and the proof of that is it is destroying the things that it needs in order to sustain. In other words, capitalism can't exist if we don't have fresh water. Capitalism can't exist if if we can't occupy large swaths of the earth. Capitalism can't exist if we run out of the natural resources that produce the stuff that drives economic growth, right? Okay, this is what is actually we're moving in that direction, okay? And so therefore, this is why, as creatures, as humans of necessity, in other words, you either adjust to the reality of the situation or you go extinct. Right? We know the dinosaurs went extinct, that meteors hit the planet, it changed the environment and stuff like that, and they couldn't adjust in time and they died off. That could be us by our own hand. No, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen hundreds of years from now. But the idea is the evidence is supporting the fact that if we continue to do this, the living conditions that we require in order to be human are changing to the point where we won't be able to exist. So I'll leave you with this example, and then, coach, it's all you. Okay. Look at Chernobyl. We know Chernobyl was the worst nuclear plant disaster in history.
Up until
Okay.
Japan, I would say.
Oh no, it's even worse. Well, Japan is a different. What the idea is that it created an area where for 10,000 years humans can't live there. So Sir David Attenborough did a movie, Life on Our Planet, that he released in September of 2020. Go check it out. It's on Netflix. Or it's available in a lot of places. But he went back to Chernobyl. Right. And the amazing thing about Chernobyl is even though we can't live there for 10,000 years because the radioactivity is too severe, right? The entire place has come back. It's lush forests. You have horses, you have deer, you have flowers, it's amazing how nature has adjusted to that radioactive environment that humans can't live in, right? So what his point was is that it's not that the earth is going to go away. It's just that we're creating conditions where we won't exist there. Okay. So that's why out of necessity we need to reconsider another form of economics. Okay. That's where we're at.
So this is great. Chernobyl's an important point. I understand exactly what you're saying. I know sometimes I digress and you feel like I'm missing the point. I'm not missing the point. The point is perfectly made clear. I will. Okay, so let me. I wish I were better at. I wish I were better at Zoom. But so the other day, I've got a candidate. I don't know if you can see. Nope, you can't. Okay,
No,
so
can't.
it's
Yeah.
vote. Vote Banks Helfrich, your local farmer, Florida for the Florida House. Banks Helfrich is a local farmer. When I interview him on this show, he is in a house, right? It's a small house. It's an open concept. You open the doors on both ends of the house, and you're basically naturally air conditioned. He's 100% comfortable. So he's not using energy to air condition. You go out of his house, it's his farm. Like he says, I had a tomato sandwich today. I needed to go buy the bread at the grocery store and the mayo, but he's growing a lot of his own stuff. Then you can't, you've been to my house. You can open both doors. You're not going to feel any air upstairs and you're going to feel very little downstairs. So it's not reasonable to believe that everybody's going to be able to remodel their homes to be more energy efficient. So we're in a point where, like I said, we've got social entrepreneurs preaching the word of how do we do better over time. So why is it that political parties adopt these positions that you're either you're either talking about something that can't be done, or you're just stupid for believing it should be done. When in fact, we know what you're saying is, I mean, everybody that's going to listen to the show is going to know Kevin Howard's right. We've got to reconfigure our economy to sustain our Earth. It's that simple. It just comes down to that. We've got to reconfigure how we do business to sustain our Earth. Now, the capitalists are going to spin it a different way. They're going to say, well, then there'll be no jobs. Then there'll be no higher paying jobs. But there is higher paying jobs in things like natural resource and understand and like what you do, natural resource management. There is good paying jobs in that. You've got a consulting business that does really well, I believe. And
Exactly.
so and so there is this movement. It's just how do we make the movement bigger, faster moving? Then, when we talk about Chernobyl being the worst, we also here in the United States faced a near Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. In
Yes.
Japan, we got a nuclear power plant that went sunk underwater. Whether it's a worse disaster or less of a disaster, but then we've both agreed that some of the solution is smaller power plants along combined with solar plants, and then you get to load power energy. Load power means you can power a community, you can power a state. It's
Yes.
not it means it's a viable option, but there's nuclear in there. So then we keep some people are going to beat the narrative. You want another Chernobyl in your backyard? You want another 3 Mile Island, an actual 3 Mile Island in your backyard? So how do we when you need energy, when you want to stop digging out of the mountains coal, when you want to stop pulling out of the ground oil, when you want to stop fracking, which is terrible for the earth, and it seems like it's the one option that prevailed, though of the newest options, it's the one that's really prevailing now is fracking, which is just absolutely terrible for the earth. When there's viable options, why do we always pick the worst options? Why isn't it your voice isn't louder? Why is it politicians have decided to drown out your voice and stick to their guns on their two positions that you're either going to adopt this $30 trillion Green Deal or you're going to stand with us on the right and say that $30 trillion Green Deal is a bunch of crap? That's my question. So it's a lot for you to answer, but it is going to be your
Well,
job to try and answer.
sure, I can answer that. This is why this is another indication of why I like to use our RPM example of why capitalism is running deep in the red. Okay, because the way people are making money today, and I'm talking about big money, big corporations, is that they minimize the cost of the product. So let's go to the nuclear disaster in Japan. Okay, the reason why that disaster occurred is because they didn't design the nuclear power plant to be the best nuclear power plant we understood to make. They actually cut corners, right, and designed it in a way that was did not adequately prepare the impact of it being on the coastline of the ocean. Right? Okay. What made that a worse disaster is the impact it was going to have on the ocean, the radioactive waste of that nuclear power plant. And so this is an offshoot of capitalism. If you lower your cost of your product, right, to as low as you can offer it without impacting the perceived quality of your product, then it allows you to charge the full price and you make the most money. And this is in everything we buy. The reason why the food that we eat in America is shit is because food manufacturers design food product to look as good as it can be, to taste as good as it can be, but the nutrient quality, the things that make us healthier over time, the reason why we're supposed to be eating in the first place, right? Right? Is shit because those things cost money. And so they cut those things out and get us addicted to this food that looks good and tastes good and makes us want more of it, but it doesn't provide the nutrients our body needs. So what do we get? We get diabetes, we get heart disease, we get a higher cancer. Okay, this is everything, every car, every product, every service. The producer is minimizing the cost of producing it, which means that the actual long-term quality of the product is declining. Okay, This is in the face of the fact that humans innovate. We know how to make everything better today. The fact that we don't is because the economic incentives are telling us not to. Right? You can't make the maximum amount of money if you make the if you do everything the right way for the sake of your customers, right? Right. No, no. And so this brings us back to Hollywood. This brings us back to Michael Douglas. This brings us back to the movie Wall Street in 1987, because what that told, that was a signal that the capital investor, that greed is good. And that is translated in these last 40 years is the only stakeholder that matters for corporate America is the shareholder, and that every other related stakeholder, the benefit of the shareholder is at the expense of all the other stakeholders. And who are the other stakeholders? The employees who produce the products and services get a lower cut of the productivity, of the benefit, of the revenues. The customer gets a worse product, even though they think it's better. Right, right. And the communities in which those businesses serve are destroyed through the lack of concern for how it impacts the environment or whatever. All the other stakeholders are screwed at the expense of the shareholder, which is why corporate profits are at an all-time high, but everyone else is worse off. Okay,
Right,
so
corporate prices are soaring. And according to the
that's
forward, the heresy of church economics, which I love the way he said that, the heresy of church economics, but it's there. And it's really hard to reverse. And
well,
that's why I'm
okay.
saying,
It's really hard to reverse, but here's the thing. This is America. How did America fall? It was really hard for Thomas Jefferson to write, the Declaration of Independence, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. He said that at a time that no country on this planet believed that, right? We had kings, we had divine providence and stuff like that. No. Okay, what I'm saying here is that yes, it's hard. Yes, creating something new, innovating something new is hard. We're at a moment where if we don't do that, right, we will face existential challenges. So yes, it's going to be hard. Of course, it's going to be hard. And the reason why but see, I'm no longer in the hinterland. There were predecessors who saw this coming 20 years ago, 40 years ago. They were in the hinterland. What I'm saying to you is people like John Fullerton, people like there's so many incredible innovators. Second Muse Capital, Second Muse. There are many players out here who recognize where we are and they're working on what is a credible alternative. Because I can tell you this much, we're not talking about your farm friend that we're expecting people to open up both doors of their house and not use AC in the state of Florida. That we're not talking about degrading our quality of life. We're talking about, can we innovate a way that we can maintain and continue to improve our quality of life and use less resources. This is what innovation does.
well,
And yes, we're capable of doing that. So what I'm saying, that's
actually, Banks' way of life is really neat, if you ask me. I think it's really cool to live on,
yes,
and I would love to
but
see
that's not
more
for
of it.
everyone, and
Not for
it's not
everyone,
practical.
right?
It's not practical. But see, it gives a certain impression. People who hear that say, see, that's why I don't want to hear, I don't want to talk to them eggheads, right? Because I'm not living that way. I'm not giving up my dually. I'm like, well, okay, I get you. For the person who doesn't want to give up your dually, there is a way, right, for you to
Well, you would
enjoy
just
the
role play
dually.
and clarify. You would just role play because you don't have a dually, do
I
you?
don't have a dually, but the idea is I stand. I, I stand with the working class. I totally understand a man who wants to, or a woman who wants to go out in the woods and hunt for their own food. I respect it. I'm not that okay, but the point is, you can have this lifestyle. You can have that lifestyle and better, and we can be more efficient about the resources we use. In other words, we're not trying to go back to the 1700s. And so we're trying to go forward to the 21st century, 22nd century, to where we can live better, healthier lives, right? And enjoy the things we really enjoy to do, but do it in a way that our grandchildren can also have healthy and productive lives too, right? And so that's why the change is coming. And but it's going to be hard. And but I love this.
Yeah,
We love doing hard things
we
when
do.
it serves us.
So let's talk about, hang on, let's get into this for a moment. We're going to talk about second muse. We're going to start there, I think. But then I'm going to read this here excerpt. I'm actually going to highlight it, which I meant to do before. Workers and teachers in the richest country in the history of the human race. And this may be still a part of the forward, is it? Or is it not?
Well,
Worker.
you go ahead and read it now, and I'll say
Okay,
because I'm.
workers and teachers in the richest country in the history of the human race, in the history of the human race, a living wage. How is it we failed to summon the political will to stop emitting more CO2 emissions into our finite atmosphere year after year, knowing what we know, because we care more about the corporations named Exxon or Aramco, or perhaps more about the entitled convenience than the life itself. Now, first of all, the first question I say, and first of all, let me highlight this. No, we don't. When we assume we know what me and you are talking about, we shouldn't assume that, because one, I'm learning about it as we speak about it and as I read your book. So to assume the average bear knows about it is not a safe assumption, because I know about a lot of things and I read a lot of stuff. And frankly, I never knew about an alternative economy until I spoke to you, and now I'm starting to think more and more and more of it. But then when we say the sort of this emotional connection to companies like Exxon and Aramco, the Exxon is on the is on the U.S. continent. The Aramco is on the Saudi continent. So we're talking about a globalized economy now. It's not necessarily an emotional connection whatsoever. It's the companies that have taken control of our day-to-day life, make a lot of decisions according to what's best for them and their executives and their shareholders, just like you said. But how do we challenge that? How do we stand up to that? I mean, you got to realize you may be able to stand up to Exxon. There's a remote chance. But let me be clear: standing up to Aramco, there is no standing up to it. I mean, you might as well say, "Hey, I'm going to go knock on the Saudi king's door first," because see how far you get trying that one. And then, so Exxon, yeah, they may feel pressure from public opinion, but I assure you, Aramco does not. So ergo my question. I could go on and on about
No, no, no.
how
I hear you, Coach. That's a great question, and also a source of advice that I give in the book. First and foremost, the quote that you read came from John Fullerton's Forward. So here is an investment banker who has come to realize what free market capitalism is. The price of free market capitalism is creating these problems that he's speaking to. Okay. The problem is occurring at this huge level. You're right. But what can we do? That's your question. The thing about it is, it all exists. Aramco exists because we go by the dually. And therefore that dually needs diesel. And who provides the diesel, right? I mean, we can make different choices. There are we are innovating heavy duty trucks that are hybrid, that can run on electricity, that have the torque and the power, that the dually has. In other words, and but we're just starting in that direction. We need to innovate more in that area in order to do better than what fossil fuels can produce. There are other sources of renewable energy, such as hydrogen, right, which has the power to replace, for heavy industry. My point is, what we as individuals can do is we can stop contributing to the problems that are hurting our lives. In other words, We have the role we can play, the part that we can control is the choices that we make. Now, again, the choice is not between do I get to hunt or do I get to drive out and fish, drive my truck out and fish or not? The choices is how can I organize my life in a way that I use less fossil fuels and achieve what I want to achieve, live the life I want to live, right? We need energy to live the lives we want to live, but we can make different choices to get it. And is if we as individuals say what we want is the ability, if you don't want us to use fossil fuels and you say we don't have to sacrifice the things that make our life worth living, then then I'm willing to buy a product that will allow me to live my life the way I want, but does not destroy the planet. So innovate that product. I will pay for that product. That's what I value. We need to we are empowered to make that choice. And that's all we have to do.
So let me
Is
jump in.
soon.
Let me jump in.
Yes. Yes.
I agree, and I sort of alluded to that by over elaborating on ride sharing. But so okay, so let's just say now we gonna take a refrigerator for an example. Just say new communities start building a community clubhouse with a community freezer. I know this sounds crazy, but with community owned slots. One freezer that's built to last 100 years, not 150 freezers that'll last 12 years in each home. I mean, it could happen because if Kevin Howard would convey his message enough, people would realize not necessarily the freezer would take don't take it over literally. Just
Yes.
saying this kind of thinking could happen. It's happening with ride sharing. But again, I go back to my initial point of the capitalist point of ride sharing, the capitalist gain point of ride sharing. Same as if this community that's built with whatever amenities that are really long term, really energy saving, really doing what we're attempting to do, save the earth. If they start selling 150 homes in 90 days versus your average community taking a year and a half to sell out, then there'll be more of those communities, which again goes back to the capitalist thinking. We're doing better. We're making more. We're selling more homes. So I always think there's going to be a partnership between capitalism and realism. The problem is that, and it's not realism. If the realism was the wrong word, capitalism and environmentalism really would be the word. It seems like there was even capitalists spieling that. And just like you said, the person that wrote this forward sort of went down that rabbit hole. Said I was a capitalist, now I'm going to become more of an environmentalist, but he didn't give up his lifestyle in the process.
Well, again, I cannot say this enough. The conflating of the macro issues, the global issues, the national issues, with what we can do as individuals. Because that's the heart of your question. And everyone listening to us is like, if they can't see what they can do as themselves, okay, then they're just not going to do, they're just going to continue to do what they're doing. Okay. So yes, at the macro level, you don't have to worry. We can't control that. Those forces are going to do what they're going to do.
Right.
But what we can do is not contribute to that. What we can do is choose to what alternatives in my life exist based on the resources I have to allow me to not contribute to the overheating of the planet, not contribute to the resource overshoot of the planet. How can I make better choices in my life and not sacrifice the lifestyle I want to have? Because that question is that's what we can do. That's where it is at.
And
And and
here's
and
my
and
one
and
question.
but hold on. If for a person to ask themselves that question and then use their technology, use the search engine, use Chat GPT to say to help to give them the options, they will find that there's many, 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 many things to do. And it is not one size fits all. There are many local communities doing all types of regenerative things, community wealth building, that are amazing, right? There is no one size fits all. If you look in the mirror and you decide this is what I can do and in my local community that works for us, that works for me, that's what you do, right? That's my book is not trying to tell you you have to all do things this way. No,
No, no.
we
But
we are
my question
independent
was,
people.
My question was, which what you just alluded to, if you Google it, if you chat GPT it, how about Kevin Howard building a website that leads people down that path, that gives the suggestions of what you can do on a personal level, and how you can
No,
demand it on a corporate level, how you could get the point across to corporate, I won't accept this substandard product. I want to see, because this is such a bigger movement than the Green Deal, even though it's never been published in Washington, even though it's never been considered in Washington. And Washington is the key indicator of public life, of public service in the world. What happens in Washington is doesn't stay in Washington. It travels across the world. So, but it's not at all been considered in Washington. But Kevin Howard writes this amazing book that opens minds, and then says, "Hey, if you want to do more, Google it, ChatGPT it." You know, I would love to see Kevin Howard build. It doesn't have to be the biggest website in the world either. You could have 20 suggestions to start. You could have people like, share, comment. Maybe they'd make more suggestions that you would ultimately endorse. So, because the movement, as far as I can tell, is not going to happen on a public service level. It's not going to happen. There's not going to be. There is Farmer Banks who's running for Florida House. I think he's going to win this time. It's his third go around, but I also think he's going to get a lot of pushback when he gets to the House, because it's mostly a conservative House. But being Florida, that is, it's a natural realism.
yes,
But
yes,
um, but there is so much here. It's just like I said in this book that we're going to literally, I think we've committed to minimum 10 sessions, and we're
yeah.
at session two, and we're into well over an hour of session two, and we're on page four now. I'm back to page four. So, and that's actually just the forward. So my point is there's so much to be had and heard and learned from this, and it may be the direction we need to go, not necessarily creep screaming, not to get, because we didn't really get political, not to say Donald Trump reversed everything Joe Biden did with the Green Deal. I thought it was a good deal. I thought it was a good bill. I thought it was reasonable price, which ever was $600 billion. No, there was a lot to be gained from it. The reverse of it's really what hurts. The whole pullback of it is really what hurts. But that's here nor there. That's just a my one point I'm going to make on that.
Well, Coach,
But
I did create a website, but here's the thing,
so
and that
what is the
website,
website?
the website is www.onwardatLast.com, ONWARDATLAST.com. Okay, but I don't list 20 things or whatever that to advise or recommend for people to do. What I'm trying to do is be breadcrumb. And
Uh,
I don't mean the food stuff. I don't mean the food product breadcrumbs. Okay. When we are walking in the woods and we lose our path, right? The breadcrumb is the clue that jogs our memory of how we get back home, right? My book is trying to jog people's memory of of who they are, how they survive, how they actually live, so that they can, by remembering that, because here's a newsflash. We, our culture and our cultural belief systems, right, informed by the prevailing virtues, values, and narratives of our society. And I speak as an American, as a U.S. Army veteran, right? I love our country, but our cultural belief system has hidden who we are. We believe in our cultural belief system as who we are, and this is how we see the world. But we're not, but we're actually much more than that, right? And if you can penetrate past that cultural belief system to tap into who you are, you will start to remember, right, that we are actually a part of one human family, that we actually live interdependently, right? That none of us produce the air we breathe. None of us produce the water we drink, or the food we eat, or the clothes we wear, on and on. All of us curate our skills and offer it in exchange for money. And then we take the money and we buy all the things we need to sustain ourselves that everyone else produces. We don't produce it ourselves. Okay. So if you understand that that's how you survive every day, that literally we we survive every day based on the contributions of thousands of people we will never know. Okay. If you recognize that, right, it changes how you make your choices. But instead, we are making our choices right now based on these core American virtues: freedom, independence, self interest, and competition. Those are good things when they are applied within a reasonable range. We go back to the car example with the RPMs. If is each of those principles are valuable and assert as well, as long as the RPMs is at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. But when you push the RPMs into the red zone, 9,000, 10,000, 12,000, the car doesn't function the way it's designed. Neither does freedom, neither does independence, neither does self-interest, neither does competition. Okay. Why? Because if you compete in a way that you hurt the hands that serve you every day, it hurts you too. If you practice your self-interest in a way that hurts the hands of the people who support you every day, it hurts you too. Okay. And this is where we are. Okay. So my book is trying to be a breadcrumb to remind people that none of us live independently and we're incapable of living independently. That doesn't mean that we don't make choices, that we're not sovereign, that we're not individuals. Of course we are. We are as individual as the fingers on our hand. And each finger can move individually. But if you cut the thumb off and put it on the desk, it will stop wiggling. It can't function anymore. And that's us. So yes, we make choices and we build our lives. But if the trees stop inhaling our carbon dioxide and exhaling the oxygen that we breathe, we can't make choices anymore because we don't have air. If the sun stops shining, we can't make choices anymore because nothing will grow. The planet will freeze, right? If the atmospheric pressure of this planet does not changes, the skin of our bodies cannot hold the internal pressure and we will explode. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that's where
We do not exist independently. And so we have to penetrate past these virtues that we live by and remember who we are. Once that's all I'm trying to do is get people to remember who we are and how we live every day. If once you recognize that you survive based on the actions of thousands of people you don't know, all of a sudden their politics doesn't matter that much. All of a sudden, right, they are important. Why? Because you can't survive without them. Right. And we have forgotten that. Because once we remember that reality, we will know what to do. I'm not trying to tell people what to do once they recognize that we're a part of one human family and that we survive because we cooperate, right? Right. Once they recognize that, they will know what to do. And it won't be what Kevin Howard does. It will be what makes sense for them, but it'll be informed by the reality of how we live our lives.
So this is a great break point. This is a great point where we can carry on to where we can say let's continue this at another set in the next session. Okay, so let me do
Absolutely.
this. Let me do this. I have learned a lot, right? Now, Kevin, you have two things. You have the book, so I want you to tell us how you came to the realization that this was the thing to do to write this book. Because I know you tell that story really well. I know you've told it every session we've had, but we don't. We're in building blocks here. We don't know who the new subscribers will be. So let them hear your story of how you wrote this book. The other thing is you have a podcast coming up. I want you to talk about that coming up because it's coming up in October, and October is coming close. Then and then so from my vantage point, I'm going to say what I believe. Political no brainer is always going to be political no brainer. I am starting two new podcasts, The Chair Across the Aisle, which is just this. I really want to talk to authors. I want authors to break down their books. So, and and like you said, when your book came out, who knows how many others came out on that one day. So I want you to have that opportunity to say, this is really, because every time we have these sessions, if somebody listens to it, it's going to drive them to actually read the book. because we're not delving into the book. We're breaking it down piece by piece. So from my vantage point, like, share, subscribe, comment, call me, text me, email me, whatever you want to do, and tell me about your book. Tell me about what you want to talk about, what you feel, how you can be a social entrepreneur. And then from Kevin's standpoint, I want you to wrap it up with how you wrote the book, with how you decided to write the book, because I love the story of how you came to the essentially epiphany that you weren't happy with the way things were going. But I'm not going to speak for you. I want you to do that part. Then, so Kevin,
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it. And I'll be as succinct as possible. Yeah, no, hey, I'm a second generation American. My mother was born in Panama and she came to the States as a teenager. And so she understood what life outside of America, in a country outside of America was like, right? And so she passionately loved this country. And she raised me and my brother to love this country passionately. Why? Because she understood the benefit of and the privilege of being an American. Okay, so she raised me with that, and so I became when I entered into my adulthood, you talk about a person who was patriotic, person who loved his country. I volunteered to serve active duty in the military, right before my 18th birthday, and I served 4 years in NATO. President Reagan was my commander in chief. I wanted to serve my country as before I started serving myself. I wanted to give back to the country who gave me everything. And so I did. I served in the military. Then I went to college, went to graduate school, built a career in banking. My dream was to help young entrepreneurs grow their businesses, create jobs, achieve their financial goals, achieve their American dream. That became my American dream, how to help people to do that. I was
can I say
successful
one
at
thing?
it. I made money. Yes. Yeah. Well, I was successful at it. I made money. It was great. But the problem was, as I entered my 40s, and what is it about 40? As I entered my 40s, I had achieved the American dream, the middle class American dream. I had the house, I had the toys, I had the wife, I had the kids, I had the money in the bank, deals were happening. And I found, is this all life is? I totally was grateful for the stuff I had, but where was the meaning and where was the purpose? Because I felt empty. Okay. And what that told me is that even though I had done everything that my society had offered me as what you can do, the optimal things you could do, it did not resonate with Kevin Howard. So therefore, I did not know who I was. And it sent me on this journey to say, okay, if doing everything that my society has told me is the right thing to do led me to a spot that didn't serve me, that didn't, even though I was comfortable, I was happy, but I wasn't fulfilled, right? That means I don't know who I am. And then I went inside and figured out who I am. What do I value? What are my priorities? How can I find purpose in life that leads to my fulfillment? Okay. And I went down that journey, and the book that I wrote, Onward at Last, is a distillation of that journey that I want to share as my gift to other Americans. Because what I discovered, I feel most of us experience. If you have been successful, or even if you're on the journey of trying to be successful, and yet you feel that same sense of hollowness, of is this all life is, right? Okay, it is read my book, because I've been there with you, and the book is going to speak to you of how you can find your way. So so the book was originally published in December 2022 by Atmosphere Press. I wrote another version in October 2024 because of the presidential election. So the current version is Onward at Last 2024 presidential election edition, which is what we've been talking about. It's available everywhere, Amazon, all the bookstores, Target, and you can go to my website, www.onwardatlast.com, and the purchase links are there too. Okay. But if you can't afford to buy the book, you could absolutely go to the blog tab on my website, and all the commentaries are available there for free, because this is a passion project for me, for you to hear and benefit from the journey that I've gone through, because it's your journey too. You're going through it in your own way. Okay, so that's the book. But on October 1st, where I'm launching a new podcast, partially exposure, inspired by you, Coach Trippy. I am launching my own podcast called Breadcrumbs. Dot dot dot. A podcast for people who know it is not working. Okay. And so that's going to be October 1st. I've already put out episode zero, which episode zero, and it's on Spotify. It's on the audio is on Spotify. The video and the audio is on YouTube. And there's also a Patreon community that I'm forming, right? That you could participate on Patreon. And yeah, and the point of the podcast is to have the conversation that can illuminate the clues that can lead us back to who we are. Because right now we live in a society that's lost. If you look around your community, if you look around the United States, if you look around the world, nothing is going the way any of us hoped it would go. Everything looks askew. Everything looks bizarre. It is absolutely a pulp fiction. Okay, how did we get here? Well, that's what I mean by us saying that we're lost, and that the podcast is the bread is going to offer the breadcrumbs, the clues, so that we could find ourselves and we could figure out how do we proceed on that basis, right? And so I hope you will join. And thank you, Coach, for the opportunity of sharing all that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. I want to tell you one thing of all that. It was all really what I wanted. Everything we needed to hear. One of the interesting points was how when Ronald Reagan was your commander in chief and ultimately became a capital investment guy and ultimately you served under NATO. And it's funny, it's not funny to me. It's interesting to me that Ronald Reagan inspired those thoughts. He made capital
Yes.
investment was a Ronald Reagan piece. Absolutely. So someday I'd like to see a President Kevin Howard talk about reinvent and inspiring a whole generation of a new kind of economy, a new configured economy, because that is the next step for America. And it could benefit a lot of people in a big way. The thing I loved about Ronald Reagan was the way he conveyed his message. One
Yes.
time he sent a message about a German that loved America but returned to Germany, and then even his German friends in Germany said, "So why did you come home?" And he said, "Because the war was over. I was released." He was a prisoner of war that loved America. But the way Ronald Reagan told that story was just incredible. We don't have that right now. I'm not knocking what we have or what we don't have. I would just love to get back to the point where whether you agree or you disagree, the message conveyed is one in a positive way. And that's
I,
something
I
we're trying to do here.
I hear you, Coach. And if I can speak a moment for President Reagan, my commander in chief, I will say on one hand, I voted for Walter Mondale in 1984. That I tell you. Okay. On the other hand, I did love Reagan. But the thing I loved about Reagan, see, we're all imperfect beings, and Reagan wasn't perfect. But okay, if you remember one of his big foreign policy things that he ran on when he ran against Jimmy Carter in 1980 was the evil empire. He ran on winning the Cold War against the Soviet Union. And so he raised the stakes. I was a part of the raised stakes. He put M1 tanks and M2 Abrams across Europe, and it shifted the balance of power to the West against the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union in Europe. It was a beautiful thing. But the thing about it is, when Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union, even though Reagan had branded them the evil empire, he saw in Gorbachev someone he could work with. And he started negotiating nuclear non-proliferation treaties with Gorbachev, right? What I'm saying is Reagan had the insight to see that this was a different type of Soviet leader, that we could actually work with them. See, in the modern context, contrast that to today. You know, the thing about Reagan was he talked to his enemies and he looked at them and he took them seriously. And when he found an enemy he can actually work with, he worked with them, right? If you don't work with your enemy, the only thing you're going to do is fight with them, right? The reason why ultimately under Papa Bush, H.W. Bush, the Soviet Union stood down without going to nuclear war is because President Reagan laid the groundwork with Gorbachev, right? That America will be a part of your solution. We do not have to fight, but you need to move to us. That our way of life, our capitalism is the way to the future. And that's exactly what the Soviet Union did. Again, in 1991, they abdicated communism. Right? And we sent Jeffrey Sachs to to Russia to help them form a free market economy. So what I'm trying to say is this was the brilliance of Reagan, right?
Yes.
And even though I didn't vote for him in '84, this is the brilliance of Reagan. And I'm honored to have served for him. I was honored to be a part of NATO at that time, at that critical time. And now that we have this president, Trump, he's not going to be perfect. There's going to be lots of flaws. You may or may not have voted for him and stuff like that. But there are things that he is doing that many of us can get behind. So as opposed to throwing out the whole thing or painting him with one brush, look for what you can find in what he's doing, right? That you can get behind because that is how we can use this next 4 years in as constructive a way as we can. So I'll leave it
Absolutely.
there.
I want every president, whether I agree with you, whether I agree with them or not, to succeed. I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I'm going to leave it at that because I really do want to find that breadcrumb in Donald Trump that I can say I really agree with it. I really agree with the approach for whatever it is. And
Well,
I
Coach
will, I
Trippy,
will,
that sounds like you're going to come on my podcast
I
sometime.
am. I
And,
told you I
and
want to be the first guest. I will be the first guest, I do believe. I believe that's an understanding now.
yes,
So
yes, that is an understanding, and I'm looking forward to it.
I am
Coach,
too.
thank
I'm
you
looking
so
super.
much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin Howard, author, Onward at Last. Um, Onward at Last, the 2024 presidential election edition. Get the book, listen to the podcast. We are literally got so much more to do dissecting this book. We are not delving into it. We are taking it piece by piece. I love it. I love our conversations. Let's do it again. I'm gonna text you, see if a good day for you is see we're gonna do it again soon. The next couple of
No,
days.
no, we should let's this rotation coach is good in terms of just continuing it once a week.
Once a
On
week.
top
Once a
on
week.
top of our group podcasts,
Yes, sir.
and so
Which
this
seems
is
to be
there's
every
no
2 to 3 weeks. It's
yeah,
good. It's a good
it's good.
schedule. It's a
So
schedule that
that
works.
it works as long as this works for you and stuff like that. I know this
Yes.
part of the discussion will be cut out, but the point is
Not
that
necessarily because Beth was expressing intrigue about the book. She's digging into it, so it may very well come up.
no,
So
well, no,
let's
I'm
not
looking
assume
forward to that.
anything. Yes.
That's
Yeah, like we
exactly
said, we
right.
really want to hear more from her. We definitely want to hear more from her. So that was a great way to. I love it. So that's it. Political no brainer. That is the podcast. Like, share, subscribe, comment. You can see us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, all the outlets, iHeart Podcast, I believe, all the outlets, and we want to hear from you. We want to grow the audience because it's not about divisiveness. It's not about winner takes all at all. It's about finding solutions and finding common ground and just having a normal conversation without wanting to throw stuff at each other. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you. We will talk. I will text you soon about another
Indeed,
day.
sounds good. And you all who've listened to this point, thank you so much for your listening and jump into the conversation. Reach out to each of us. Let's make this really happen.
Let's make America work together again.
There
Thank
we
you,
go. I
Kevin.
love it. I love it.
Thanks, Kevin. Talk to you
Bye.
soon. Bye,
Bye
buddy.
now.